A single glance, a misunderstanding. When accounting assistant Sarah Chen is mistaken for catering staff at the Metropolitan Museum's elite fundraising gala, humiliation burns through her. But beneath her simple black dress lies a secret, one that will leave Manhattan's wealthiest art patrons stunned into silence when the truth is finally revealed. Before we dive into the story, comment below where in the world you're watching from. Sarah Chen tucked a strand of hair behind her ear as she surveyed the Metropolitan Museum of Art's marble atrium. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the space, transforming it for tonight's annual fundraising gala. Waitstaff in crisp black uniforms circulated with champagne flutes, while New York's elite arrived in designer finery. Her simple black dress, purchased on sale 3 years ago, suddenly felt woefully inadequate. She smoothed invisible wrinkles from the fabric, conscious of how it lacked the shimmer and architectural precision of the gowns flowing past her. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It's just one night." As the museum's new accounting assistant, Sarah hadn't expected to attend the gala at all. But Melissa from the development office had called in sick at the last minute, leaving them short-staffed for guest registration. "Miss Chen?" Sarah turned to find Daniel, the event coordinator, hurrying toward her with a clipboard. "Thanks again for stepping in. The guest list is arranged alphabetically." He handed her the clipboard. "Just check names off and direct VIPs to Victoria." He nodded toward a statuesque woman in a crimson gown who commanded attention at the center of the room. Victoria Hamilton, the museum's development director. Even from a distance, Sarah could sense her authority, the way other staff members orbited around her like satellites. "Got it," Sarah said, taking her position behind the registration table. For 20 minutes, she checked in guests with practiced efficiency, smiling as she handed out program booklets and name badges. Most barely acknowledged her, their attention already fixed on the networking opportunities awaiting them inside. "Who invited the accountant?" The stage-whispered comment from someone passing by stung, but Sarah maintained her professional demeanor. She wasn't here to impress anyone. She was here to do a job. Then, Victoria Hamilton's gaze fell directly on her, and Sarah felt a chill of apprehension as the development director strode purposefully in her direction. "Excuse me, miss?" Victoria's voice cut through the ambient chatter. Her eyes, sharp as cut crystal, barely registered Sarah's face. "We need someone to help serve drinks. The catering staff is short-handed." Sarah straightened, clipboard pressed against her chest. "I'm sorry, but I'm not part of the catering staff. I work in accounting. Daniel asked me to help with registration." Victoria looked her up and down, taking in the modest dress and lack of designer accessories. Her perfectly arched eyebrow lifted slightly. "Well, you certainly look like serving staff in that outfit." She gestured dismissively toward the bar. "Just help out for an hour. We need all hands on deck." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria turned to whisper something to the distinguished gray-haired man beside her. Brendan Powell, the museum's board chairman, glanced in Sarah's direction and smirked. Heat crawled up Sarah's neck. She wanted to explain that she'd been specifically assigned to registration, that she had no experience serving drinks at high-profile events. But Victoria had already moved on, greeting a wealthy donor with air kisses and effusive compliments. With burning cheeks but unwilling to cause a scene, Sarah set down her clipboard and made her way to the bar. The catering manager looked surprised, but quickly handed her a tray of champagne flutes. "Just circulate and make sure everyone has a drink," he instructed, "and try to smile." For the next 45 minutes, Sarah served champagne to patrons who barely acknowledged her existence. Some took glasses without breaking conversation. Others stared through her as if she were invisible. "Hey, drink girl!" A man in a tailored tuxedo snapped his fingers to get her attention. "Being another round for the table." Sarah swallowed her discomfort and nodded. "Right away, sir." As she turned toward the bar, she noticed a latecomer entering the gala. Unlike the other guests who arrived in noisy clusters, this man entered alone, moving with quiet confidence. His tuxedo was impeccable, but understated. Something about his thoughtful expression as he surveyed the room caught her attention. Marcus Wellington, the museum's largest benefactor, had arrived. The man accepted a champagne flute from Sarah's tray with a nod of thanks, the first genuine acknowledgement she'd received all evening. Their eyes met briefly, and she was struck by the warmth in his gaze. "First time working the gala?" he asked. Sarah hesitated. "Actually, Wellington, there you are!" Victoria's voice rang out as she materialized beside them. She touched the man's arm possessively. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." "Traffic," he replied simply, his attention still partially on Sarah. Victoria's smile tightened as she noticed. "Thank you," she dismissed Sarah with a flick of her wrist. "We need you serving the east corner." Sarah retreated, feeling oddly disappointed at the interruption. As she circulated with her tray, she caught fragments of conversation. Discussions about yacht purchases, summer homes in the Hamptons, and charitable donations measured in millions. This was a world apart from her small apartment in Queens, where she'd been working late nights for years, building something few people knew about or understood. The evening took another uncomfortable turn when Sarah, balancing a precarious stack of empty glasses, accidentally bumped into Brendan Powell. "Watch where you're going!" He snapped loudly enough for nearby guests to turn. "I'm so sorry, sir," Sarah said, steadying the tray. Powell looked down his nose at her. "This is why we hire professionals. Where did Victoria find you anyway? The temp agency for the desperately incompetent?" Several onlookers chuckled. Sarah felt her face burning, but maintained her composure. "Perhaps she should stick to counting beans in the back office," added a woman in a designer gown, clearly aware of Sarah's actual position. "At least there she can't spill anything on $10,000 suit," Powell said, making a show of brushing his sleeve, though nothing had actually spilled. Sarah retreated to the bar, hands trembling slightly. The catering manager shot her a sympathetic look. "Don't take it personally," he murmured. "Half these people couldn't open their own car doors without assistance. A small consolation, but Sarah appreciated it nonetheless." She checked her watch, only 20 more minutes before the presentation portion began. She could endure anything for 20 minutes. What she couldn't know was that in those 20 minutes, everything was about to change. Marcus Wellington had been observing Sarah throughout the evening. He watched curiously as she handled rude comments with quiet dignity, noting how different her demeanor was from the usual staff. Her patience seemed to come from somewhere deeper than mere professional training. When the presentation portion of the evening began, Sarah gratefully returned her tray to the bar and moved to stand at the back of the room, as far from Victoria's spotlight as possible. The lights dimmed slightly as Victoria tapped her glass for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria's voice carried effortlessly through the space. "Tonight we celebrate this magnificent institution and the generous supporters who make our work possible." Sarah folded her hands in front of her, content to blend into the shadows. She noticed Marcus Wellington watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. Victoria continued. "We're especially thrilled to announce our newest corporate partnership, and the anonymous donor, who has generously funded our educational program expansion with a gift of $5 million. The crowd murmured appreciatively. $5 million was significant even in this company. This donor has requested anonymity until tonight, and we're honored to finally reveal the name behind this transformative gift. Sarah tensed. Something in Victoria's tone made her stomach knot. She'd specifically requested her donation remain anonymous indefinitely. That had been part of the agreement. Victoria gestured toward the stage. I'd like to invite Marcus Wellington to make this special announcement. Marcus approached the microphone with measured steps. His eyes scanned the crowd before landing directly on Sarah. Thank you, Victoria. His voice was warm, but carried undertones of something Sarah couldn't quite identify. I'd like to introduce you all to our anonymous benefactor, though it seems some of you have already met her tonight in a rather different capacity. Confused murmurs spread through the crowd. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. She doesn't seek the spotlight, Marcus continued. In fact, she's been giving generously to this museum for 3 years without public recognition. Victoria's smile became strained as she glanced around the room, clearly uncertain where this was going. Marcus extended his hand toward the back of the room. Sarah Chen isn't just our accounting assistant. She's also the CEO and founder of Chen Innovation Technologies, which recently went public, valued at over $2 billion. The room fell silent as all eyes turned toward Sarah. Victoria's mouth fell open in shock, her glass of champagne dangerously tilted. Brendan Powell's face drained of color as he recognized the woman he'd treated with such disdain. Sarah felt her heart pounding as she slowly walked forward. The crowd parted before her like the Red Sea, creating a path to the stage. Each step felt simultaneously like the longest journey of her life and the culmination of everything she'd worked for. Marcus smiled warmly as she approached. Sarah began donating to this museum anonymously 3 years ago when she was building her company, he explained to the crowd. She wanted her gift to be valued for its impact rather than for the name attached to it. As Sarah took her place at the microphone, she could feel the weight of hundreds of stares. Just hours earlier, these same people had looked through her as if she were invisible. I believe in this museum's mission to make art accessible to everyone, she said, her voice gaining strength with each word. Growing up in a working-class family, museums were my window to possibilities. That's why I focused my giving on educational programs that reach underserved communities. She paused, looking directly at Victoria and Brendan Powell. And that's also why I understand the value of every position here, from the director to the serving staff. Each person contributes to creating an environment where art can transform lives. The silence in the room was deafening. Several guests shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how they'd treated the woman, now revealed to be worth billions. Victoria stepped forward, her professional mask slipping back into place despite her obvious discomfort. Sarah has been remarkably humble about her accomplishments, she stammered. Her fingers twisted nervously around her nearly empty champagne flute. We had no idea. That's rather the point, isn't it? Marcus interjected gently. We often fail to see the value in people until we're told they're valuable. The room erupted in applause, strained and uncertain at first, then growing more enthusiastic as people realized the appropriate response. Sarah stood uncomfortably in the spotlight, unused to such attention despite her business success. She deliberately kept a low profile throughout her career, focusing on building her company rather than her personal brand. As the applause faded, she stepped aside, allowing Victoria to reclaim the microphone. The development director had recovered her composure, though her smile remained tight. "What an incredible surprise," Victoria said, voice honeyed with newfound respect. "We're so honored to have Sarah not just as our anonymous benefactor, but as part of our museum family." Sarah nodded politely, knowing the words were hollow. This wasn't about her, it was about the money she represented. The thought would have bothered her more if she hadn't expected exactly this reaction. After the formal presentation concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by board members and wealthy patrons, all eager to introduce themselves. Business cards appeared from designer clutches and bespoke suit pockets. Invitations to charity events, private dinners, and exclusive clubs flowed freely. "I had no idea CIT was your company," gushed a woman who had earlier complained about Sarah's service. "My husband's investment firm has been trying to secure a meeting with your team for months." Sarah smiled thinly. "You can contact my executive assistant. I'm sure she'll be happy to put you on the waiting list." Brendan Powell materialized at her elbow, his earlier disdain replaced by ingratiating charm. "Miss Chen, I must apologize for our misunderstanding earlier. Had you known I was wealthy, you would have treated me with respect," Sarah finished for him. Her voice remained pleasant, but her eyes were cool. "That's rather the problem, isn't it, Mr. Powell?" He flushed, mouth opening and closing without sound. A thin sheen of sweat appeared on his forehead as he realized his misstep. Marcus Wellington approached, offering Sarah a much-needed reprieve from the uncomfortable encounter. "I hope you'll forgive me for revealing your secret," he said quietly. "I've watched how people treated you all evening, and it seemed time for a lesson in humility. Theirs, not yours." Sarah smiled, her first genuine smile of the evening. "They would have found out eventually," she said, "though I admit your timing was rather dramatic. Sometimes drama is the only way to make a point." He offered her a fresh glass of champagne. To quiet competence and unexpected revelations. They clinked glasses as Victoria approached, her professional smile firmly in place, but her eyes calculating. "Sarah, darling, we must discuss your involvement with the museum going forward. As a major donor, you should have a more prominent role." She lowered her voice conspiratorially. "Perhaps we could discuss a board position." "I thought board positions required significant financial contributions," Sarah replied mildly. "Wasn't I just serving drinks an hour ago?" Victoria's smile faltered. "That was a terrible misunderstanding. I feel absolutely mortified." "Do you?" Sarah's tone remained pleasant. "I wonder if you'd feel the same way if I were still just an accounting assistant." Before Victoria could respond, the museum director joined them, profusely apologizing for the evening's unfortunate confusion. His hands trembled slightly as he offered Sarah his card. "Please call my office directly to schedule a proper tour of our new acquisition storage. We have several pieces I believe would interest you." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and apologies. People who had ignored Sarah earlier now hung on her every word. The transformation was both fascinating and disturbing, a real-time demonstration of how quickly perceptions could shift when money entered the equation. By evening's end, Sarah's simple black dress had become the most talked-about outfit in the room, reframed as a statement of understated confidence rather than an indicator of lower status. Marcus found her as the crowd began to thin. "I'm headed out," he said. "Can I offer you a ride?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She'd had enough of the sudden sycophantic attention. In the quiet of his car, she finally relaxed. "Thank you," she said, "for what you did back there." Marcus shrugged. The museum board needed that wake-up call. They've been operating in an elitist bubble for too long. You've been challenging them on this? For years. Art belongs to everyone. Growing up without money shouldn't mean growing up without beauty or inspiration. Sarah studied his profile in the passing streetlights. "You're different from what I expected." "So are you," he replied with a smile. 1 week later, Sarah sat in the executive conference room at the museum. As the newest board member, she'd called an emergency meeting to discuss staff treatment policies. Victoria entered last, her confident stride diminished since the gala. She'd apologized profusely several times, explaining she'd never seen photos of the elusive CEO who avoided publicity. Sarah had accepted with grace, but made it clear she expected concrete changes. "I've prepared a proposal," Sarah began, distributing folders. "The museum will implement a comprehensive respect policy that applies to all staff, regardless of position." Brendan Powell cleared his throat. "Is this really necessary?" "One unfortunate misunderstanding. For me? No." Sarah's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "For the dozens of employees who experience similar treatment every day without the protection of a billion-dollar company behind them. Absolutely essential." As Sarah outlined the new staff recognition program, she noticed Victoria's feigned attention, nodding mechanically while checking her phone under the table. Marcus, however, took detailed notes, occasionally adding thoughtful suggestions. "This policy includes consequences for board members who mistreat staff," Sarah concluded, making direct eye contact with Brendan Powell. His face flushed. "You can't possibly expect—" "I can and do," Sarah interrupted calmly. "I've witnessed 3 incidents myself in just one visit. Imagine what happens daily." The CFO nervously adjusted his tie. "Implementation would require significant resources." "Which I'm personally funding," Sarah replied. "Any other concerns?" The boardroom fell silent. Sarah allowed herself a small smile, remembering the night she'd served drinks with burning cheeks. The same people who dismissed her now hung on her every word. 6 months later, Sarah stood before a group of high school students from Queens, leading them through the museum's new immersive technology exhibit, funded by her donation, but bearing no namesake. "Art isn't just for people who can afford gala tickets," she told them. "It belongs to everyone." Marcus joined her as the students explored interactive displays. "Attendance from underserved communities is up 60%, he reported. "And staff satisfaction? Highest it's been in a decade. Victoria's actually implementing your mentorship program." Sarah smiled. "Sometimes people just need to see things differently." "Speaking of seeing things differently," Marcus said, "the board's annual retreat is next month. Victoria suggested we might want to revisit the dress code." Sarah laughed. "Perfect, but I might just show up in that same black dress." "Making a statement?" Marcus asked, smiling. "Reminding myself and everyone else where I started." Sarah watched a student excitedly demonstrate the touch-screen exhibit to his friends. Value isn't determined by appearances or balance sheets. As they walked through the gallery, Sarah noticed Victoria giving a tour to potential donors. The development director caught her eye and nodded respectfully. Not because of Sarah's wealth, but because of the transformation she'd sparked. That evening, Sarah hung the simple black dress in her closet, rather than discarding it. It represented not just a moment of humiliation overcome, but a powerful reminder. True worth comes from character, not credentials. Sometimes the most valuable people in any room are the ones nobody notices until they change everything. Some lessons take only one night to learn.